Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm just going to be doing a mini vlog where I'm reading two books that have been on my TBR for the month of November, and I just feel like vlogging about them helps me to really think about whether I'm enjoying the book, to rate it better, and yeah, just to make sure that I actually finish the book sometimes. The first book I'm going to be reading is My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. So this is going to be a buddy read with my mom because everyone has been talking about reading Rebecca because of the new Netflix movie, and as much as I'd love to participate in that, I actually already read Rebecca when I was in high school, and even though I've forgotten most of it and would, love to try and plunge myself back into the beautiful writing of Daphne du Maurier, once you know the twist of Rebecca, once you know the reveal at the end and everything, it's kind of boring. You don't partially want to reread it, or at least I don't. I feel like that's the main reason that the book is interesting. And so once you know it, I don't really see the point anymore. So I thought I would try myself at another book of hers. And my mom loves Daphne du Maurier, and we suggested reading My Cousin Rachel. There is also a movie with Rachel Weisz, but I've never seen it, so I don't know what happens in this book. It has to do with this guy who is very suspicious of his cousin's wife, I think. And then his cousin dies, and he goes to visit his cousin's wife and thinks that she definitely murdered him, but then he slowly falls in love with her. So I don't know what it's going to be like, but I think it's going to be quite similarly to Rebecca, creepy horror thriller romance. I don't really know what's going to happen in it, but it's interesting. I'm excited to get into this one. And then the other book I'm going to be reading during this vlog is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I forgot her name for a second here. I've read from her The Naturals, which was really good, which is basically a YA version of Criminal Minds if you're interested in it. And this has been compared to Knives Out. This has to do with a girl who inherits suddenly a bunch of money from an old guy she's absolutely never met, but she has to move into this house with all of his sons or grandsons or something, and I guess there's like some games to make sure that she does inherit the money. That's all I know about this, but it's a YA book and I like the author and her writing style, so I'm expecting to really enjoy this. Hi, so I've now read about 90 pages of My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. So far, I don't know how I feel yet about it because it's a bit slow, and I don't love a slow-paced book usually, but I'm wondering whether it's slow because it's just very slow as a building up to something more, and it's gonna suddenly accelerate at some point, which I am expecting because I do think all the stuff that I mentioned at the beginning are gonna happen soon. But I don't know whether it's that or if it's gonna be just slow paced the entire time because it's quite an old book. It was written in the 50s, I think. 1951 was the first time it was published, so maybe it's just slow because of that, because of the time it was written in. So we start by following Philip, who is the cousin of Ambrose. Philip is our main character and he is quite young. He tells us that he's now 25 and that he's now glad everything is over and won't see Rachel again, but that he still doesn't know at all whether she was the cause of his cousin Ambrose's death or not, whether she killed him or not. We kind of start off with the knowledge that we might not get a satisfying ending, like a proper conclusion to the mystery. I kind of started this book thinking, oh, I don't know how I feel about that because I'm hoping that it will be satisfying by the end. And now I'm like, I have a feeling that it is going to stay as a Did she? Didn't she? We don't know. And yeah, that's kind of how you know from the very beginning. I don't think it counts as a spoiler when it's literally in the very first 3 pages. But then we go back in time and we go from the moment that he was receiving letters from his cousin Ambrose, who had gone to Italy on a trip because he doesn't like to stay in England over the winter because he finds it too gloomy. So he is basically off to Italy, and there he meets Rachel, who is already widowed, and she apparently charms him enough that he suddenly falls in love with her and they get married. However, we don't know much else about her, and we do know about Ambrose that from the descriptions of both him and what Philip says, that they're both quite misogynistic, that they're quite sexist and think a lot of terrible things about women in general, just have no interest in them whatsoever. And it's interesting because it is written by a woman, and at a time that was more sexist than today, for sure. So I picture this to be done very much so on purpose. I have no idea whether, you know, it is, or if it's just a produce of its time actually and it wasn't done on purpose, but just in my head I'm thinking, okay, there's a reason why the main character and the guy who died are quite misogynistic. Like, there has to be a reason. As he gets letters continuously from Ambrose, who has decided to remain in Italy with his new wife, he suddenly gets one where it's apparent that Ambrose is feeling worse off. He's less joyous in his letters, he's a little bit more restrained and less happy, clearly, to be there stuck in Italy, because he really wants to come back to England at that point, and he misses home and all of that. And then he gets another letter, and it gets worse and worse, and then at some point it's pretty clear that Ambrose seems very distressed, doesn't like his wife anymore, and says something along the lines of, come here, she's out to get me, and like, come quick, basically. So Philip is persuaded that Rachel is bad for the man, and that he really just doesn't like the idea that he got married as well. He's a little bit jealous because clearly his only true family is Ambrose at this point in his life. So he sets off to Italy, but it's a long trip. It takes him 3 weeks to get there, and by the time he gets there, Ambrose has died. And he is told so by some man who I think is like a friend of the family and a lawyer or something, and pretty much says, we've sent, you know, like the will and everything back to your garden, back home in England, and yeah. So Ambrose goes back home to England, and then he gets a letter from Rachel saying that she would like to come over and that she has all of Ambrose's stuff with her, and that she'd like to be able to give them back to the family, and to Philip in particular, who's pretty much the only family Ambrose had. So she arrives, and Philip immediately realizes that everything he's been thinking, because he's certain that she's the cause of his death, and he thinks it's because of her, even though he's being told at the same time, well, he had a tumor and that's why he was going a bit crazy towards the end, because it happened as well to someone else in the family. So he's being told all this, but he doesn't believe a word of it, and he really believes Rachel is the cause of Ambrose's death. But when she arrives and he starts talking to her, he realizes she is lovely and charming, and seemingly everything she's been doing is actually not for her own benefit whatsoever. She doesn't even have a place in Ambrose's will, and he hasn't actually left her anything. Everything goes to Philip anyway, so it's not like she has any benefits whatsoever from his death, and she generally seems distressed and sad and everything. So that's where we're at. I have no idea whether it's going to devolve, then we're going to grow more suspicious of her. So far I'm really not suspicious of her though. I'm just like all on her side and not on Philip's side whatsoever, so we'll see what happens. Pardon my lack of makeup today, but last night I finished My Cousin Rachel. I gotta say, I'm rating it a 3 stars. So why am I rating it a 3 stars? I think mostly because of the first half. This is how I feel about a lot of the books that I rate 3 stars. It's books that usually I find are really good, like excellent writing, good plot, enjoyable towards the end, but somehow the first half really lets me down. It's super slow paced, and would I not be reading this book for a specific reason, I would probably DNF it. I feel like around page 150, something like that, around the middle mark, is when I finally thought that the story was finally accelerating and advancing and becoming interesting. I have a lot of thoughts about the overall plot and the ending, and it's going to be quite hard to talk about it without giving any spoilers. But one thing I can say, and the reason why I did like this book, is really what I felt was kind of like a social commentary on, you know, the place of women at the time when Daphne du Maurier wrote this. There's no dates that I remember in this book to properly, you know, place it in time, but it just felt like it was taking place much earlier than when she wrote it. This is how I felt most of the book. It's every single time the main character or narrator Philip says or does anything, I just reacted like, oh my god, what a fucking idiot. Oh my god, what an idiot. I couldn't stop myself. He was just being an idiot all the time. But I didn't mind so much because you could see his downfall. You could see him slowly, you know, getting worse and worse and becoming more and more of an idiot. And it made sense with the story and for the advancement of the plot. The other thing as well is what I was saying about the place of women, I guess, in the story, is the way that Rachel reacts to things. And like I said at the very beginning, and like this book says at the very beginning, you know from the starting point that the way that Philip wrote this, he writes, I guess we'll never know whether Rachel did it or not. That's exactly how you feel throughout the book. You're like, did she? Did she not? But whatever she did, whether she actually actively murdered someone or not, it seems to me like the way she's acting is very much her trying to defy the standards of the time for women and what was expected of women of her standing in particular. Because there's a moment that she discusses with him, with Philip, what she's gonna do, and she says, I'm gonna, you know, teach Italian lessons because I enjoy teaching Italian and that's something I can do. And he gets really offended that she would do something like that because it would show to people that she needs money and he's not providing for her. And I almost feel like the way she acts throughout the book and whatever she does or doesn't do is all, you know, kind of her saying, well, fuck you and your standards and fuck men of this time. If I want to take care of myself, I have to do it a certain way because you've put so many hurdles for women, but it's your own damn fault and you're the one who's created the situation. That's kind of how I felt overall within the story. She says that on page 213, she's discussing with Philip and she says, how can I explain to you, she said, don't you understand that my position as it is untenable simply because I am a woman? And that's it. That to me is the whole book, the whole plot. But yeah, I did enjoy it, but I did think it was very slow. I don't think I would have finished it if I wasn't reading it as a buddy read with my mom, just because to get to the point you need 150 pages and that's just too much for me. And there's a lot of long ass descriptions throughout and I was skimming through them a lot of the time, and was I not doing that, it would have taken me so much more, you know, so much more time to finish this book, and I don't particularly like that in a book. I just like my books a little bit more fast paced, so that's it. Hi and welcome back to my channel. Wait, I think we're still in the same video. This is the second book. It's The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and I have now started, and by started I mean I've made a big dent into it. I am page 140, so I've read this much. So far, freaking loving it. This is a YA novel, it's fast-paced, the main character is fun to read from, and she is kind of badass but kind of vulnerable at the same time, and also is just, it feels almost like a guilty pleasure, but I don't think it is, because I do think that this is generally well written, it's very flowy, but there's no, you know, long ass descriptions that lead to nothing. Every single scene feels like it has purpose, and that's all I want in life. I mean, in books. Basically, we follow Avery. Her name is Avery. We follow Avery Grams, who is currently kind of staying, she's not really living in it, but she's kind of staying in her car because she lives with her older sister, and they both had different moms but the same dad, and her older sister is kind of in an on and off relationship. Her name is Libby. She's in an on and off relationship with this really toxic guy, and when he comes back, Avery is like, nah, I'm out because I don't like him at all. So she goes and stays in her car. So you can tell from the very start that she's kind of like a tough gal, like a girl who just, she can handle shit. And I really like that about her. And chapters are also really short, which I'm really enjoying because you can totally put the book down at any time because chapters are like sometimes 2-3 pages and that's it. So we meet Avery, who's our narrator, and Libby, her sister, and then we see her go to class and it's kind of evident that she's very smart but just doesn't have always the time to study, and that in the meantime she's just trying to be smart about her future and thinking, if I put enough hours into my studying in order to get into college, fine, and I don't need to do any more than that because on the other hand I need to be working shifts and doing stuff. So we see that she's trying to provide for her family and like paying a little bit of the rent to Libby so that she doesn't have to support her on her own, but at the same time trying to study and get her ass to university, and that's just like, that's her main plan in life. But then one day she is asked to the principal's office, and when she gets there, there's some random guy who seems to be quite young, like just a bit older than her, but he's wearing a suit and he's acting super arrogant, and he's saying like, we've had a tough time finding you. And Libby, her sister, is there and is like, well, it's my fault. Basically, Libby has been receiving those letters and thought they were a scam, so she hasn't been giving them to Avery. And the letters are saying, we need you to come over to Texas because our grandfather has died, and he apparently requests your presence at the reading of the will, otherwise the will cannot be read. So this whole family is basically waiting for her to get her ass down to Texas in order to read this will, because they're just waiting to know what they were left. And by what they were left, they're expecting quite a lot, because Avery discovers that the guy in question, who she does not know whatsoever and has no clue why he would leave her anything and request her presence at the reading of his will, he was a billionaire with a B. Not a millionaire, a fucking billionaire. They're flown over to Texas, and there she starts meeting one by one the members of the family of this guy, including his 4 grandsons. All of them have very different personalities, and pretty much what everyone seems to be saying is, what the fuck, why would our granddad leave you anything at all? Who are you? And she's asking herself the exact same questions. And then during the will reading, it turns out he left her pretty much everything. Everyone else got scraps, like 100,000, 250,000, and that's about it. But when the guy is a billionaire, he's got so much more left than that, obviously. And all of that, including his houses, plurals, you know, his planes, whatever, everything, his estate basically goes to her. And she doesn't fucking know why. And this is where the grandsons come in and kind of say, well, one of them at least is like, look, our granddad was really famous for games and puzzles, and everything was something that was original. You had to solve something. And one of them is wondering if she's not his last riddle that they're meant to solve. And you can see this evidently in the house that has loads of like secret passages and things, and they decide to start following the clues and try and see why the hell she's the one that this guy left everything to and not his own family. And yeah, that's where it starts. So the reason why I'm really enjoying it so far is, like I've already said, the main character, the writing style, all of the cast of characters actually, I think are very vibrant and alive and really pop up the page, and I'm really enjoying that. This is not the first time I've read a book by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and I think I can actually say she did it again, because I really enjoyed the way she wrote her characters in the naturals as well, and I'm starting to think maybe she falls into the category of my favorite authors, which is great when you find out that like everything that one person writes is great and you love it. That means I can trust her to do more of that, and I can, you know, continue reading on more of her books. And the other reason I'm enjoying myself reading this is also because although the stakes are high, obviously, I don't like it when they're so high that I get anxiety from it, and sometimes I do, and I'm like, I don't want to read this because this is stressing me out. Like, if she doesn't get the money or something because she needs a fucking, you know, organ transplant or some shit, like, I wouldn't want to read it. But the reason why I'm enjoying it is because you get the strong feeling from the beginning that if Avery was left with nothing in the end, I think she would prevail. And I really like that about her character, and I think that's why I'm enjoying reading it from her point of view, is I feel like she's like, wow, this is great, I'm gonna enjoy it while it lasts because I bet it's not gonna last. But also, if she had it all gone suddenly, I would still enjoy reading from her point of view. She would still be great, she would still prevail, and she would still be absolutely fine. And I think that's why I like her character so much. Hi again. So last night I finished The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So I'm not gonna make the suspense last too long. I rated it 5 stars. I just genuinely enjoyed myself throughout the book. It was such an adventure and I just had so much fun reading it. The only truly bad thing that I have to say about this book is the ending left me with absolutely no satisfaction. But the reason behind that is because it's so clear that Jennifer Lynn Barnes had a deal for a second book at the very least, and that this is, you know, the first in a series. Perhaps, I don't know if it's going to be a duology, a trilogy, or any more than that. Considering her natural series, I think she had 4 books in that. It was really enjoyable, but we didn't have that much that was, you know, wrapped up towards the end. There was one big mystery that was definitely wrapped up towards the end, so there was some ending satisfaction. But all of the relationships that were developing, both in terms of romance, but also in terms of friendships and just learning to get along with those boys and things like that, were kind of just stopped very suddenly towards the end. And that's the only thing that disappointed me a bit. But not enough for me to drop it down to a 4 stars, just because it was still really fun, and I know it's because there's a sequel and I'm definitely going to want to read the sequel now. So yeah, there's not much else to say because I've already said the reasons why I like this book so much is mainly because of the main character. I like her attitude. I do enjoy the mystery as well, the games that they were playing, the puzzles, and the fact that even though she wasn't always the one to solve them, and sometimes the boys who have been trained their whole life from their birth to play those games and to solve those riddles, yeah, obviously they would sometimes be ahead of her, but every now and then she would get, you know, ahead of them, and it was really satisfying as well because they don't partially think that she's going to be that good at it, and then when they realize that she is, it's quite a satisfying moment. In terms of the romance aspects in this book, I don't think that they were too prominent, and I kind of enjoyed that. I think there was a lot of, you know, a little bit of lusting here and there, just the right amount for a YA novel, but not to the point of it developing properly into a romance. And I think I really enjoyed that because you can tell that it's more of a slow burn, and I think I really dislike it when it is, you know, instant love type of things like in Twilight. Although there is a bit of instant lust, it's not, you know, going too far in this book either, and it does leave you to wonder what's going to happen in the next book. That's all I can say without giving spoilers, so I'm going to stop talking about this book now. So yeah, that was it for these 2 books in this little vlog. I am sorry if this is not very themed. It's just that I kind of picked the books at random in my TBR game, and I wanted to see it through and not properly plan every book that I was going to read for video purposes. So this has been quite fun, but I also would like to go back to planning a little bit more, some more themed vlogs. So for instance, I have a series going on where I'm reading the best paranormal romances according to a Goodreads list. I also have a couple of, you know, secret TBRs that I want to start filming for. Again, if you're new here and you're interested in seeing more of that type of videos, please leave a like, consider subscribing, ring the bell, all that jazz, and I will see you guys next time.